want to talk about two particular characters that were favorite of mine. Wolverine, obviously, who didn't love Wolverine,
Yeah.
and Magneto. They happen to be two people that were the movies really highlighted a lot. So let's talk about when you came up with this new concept. We talked about the Crocodile Dundee uh, version of Wolverine.
Yeah.
When you came up with Wolverine, did you expect him to be this hit impact character because of everything he's been through? He's been alive for like hundreds of years, been through so many different time frames, and got somewhat anger issues, rages from here and there. But he's also a very compassionate guy, and he's full of passion. You know, Wolverine represents a young man who doesn't know what to do with his anger.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Well, that was a real gift to have him, because I think most of that is right there in the books for me to draw for us to draw from for the show. Our dear late friend, a gentleman named Len Wein, who was a co-creator of Wolverine back in 1974. Len came up with this guy, and he grew through Chris Claremont's writing from like 74 through about 1990. Excuse me, when we took over for him, and he just, I think there's something, I don't know. You're right. There's something about him that just grabs people. We had to try to minimize what we wrote about Wolverine, because everybody wanted to write him. Everybody wanted him in almost every scene because he's so interesting. And we pushed, I think, his more tortured side, his more damaged side, because the comics in the time in the 90s were pretty ferocious. I mean, there's a real limit what we in a kid's show that you want to show these people just ripping the hell out of each other and screaming at each other. So we channeled a lot of the ferocity of the comic books and made it more emotional damage and emotional. So that's why you keep on running into old girlfriends and things. As you said, Wolverine was a gift to us because he was 95 years old and he'd been through all this living. Whereas Jubilee, we're talking about the Nightcrawler episode the other day about how when we set that story up, we got this new character and he's devout and religion, Christianity is the core of his life.
Mm-hmm.
We need a character to interact with him who's struggling with his faith. And who would be more interesting? The guy that's lived 95 years, probably had faith, has lost it, has regained it, has seen too much and has lost it again, whatever, versus say Jubilee's 13. She hasn't thought through this, had chance to think through a lot of this stuff yet. So when we put two people next to each other, someone next to Nightcrawler, it was Wolverine, because we knew what he'd struggled through. And when he is having trouble looking at Nightcrawler and talking about faith, you really feel it. You just feel the struggle. 90 years of struggle with this man. So that was a real gift, having him. And then the fact that he's got like five old girlfriends that want to kill him.
Yuriko and all these other ones.
Yeah, all these ones. It made for good personal stories to bounce him off of. Out of the chute was the favorite X-Men character, like in his first year, and he's never given that up. There's just something elemental about him. Mm-hmm. And they've created thousands of characters for the books, and he just stuck.
Yeah,
there's something special about him.
Yeah, and Wolverine, he kind of fits more like Magneto side with his rage, right? Like he would, but the fact that he was with Xavier kind of shows that he has compassion. He believes in Xavier's ideology, as opposed to someone who's more like the aggressive, like himself, Magneto. So that was very interesting too.
And in the original comic books, when Magneto was shown, he was shown being torn away from concentration camp and watching his parents be taken away to die. In our shows, we hadn't shown Magneto's vulnerable side much, the way we do with Wolverine, because Wolverine hurts for things, and Magneto's just whatever he's been through, man. He has hardened himself, and he's not going to let that get in his way anymore. He's not going to let old. So yeah, so that's a funny thing about Wolverine. However tough and growly and feral he is, like the Cal Dodd, who did the voice, the wonderful voice. His direction when he was auditioning, he said, well, what's this guy like? He said, well, he's wild, he's feral, like an animal. So he growled. So, and he got the job right there. He said, okay, this is the guy. He's growling at us. And he complained about that. That was one of the funny things in doing an interview with him. He said he hated the shows where it was him and Sabretooth, because they'd always have about 4 or 5 minutes of fighting, and he'd have to be screaming at each other the whole time. That man, like, he'd tear his voice out.
Yeah, me and my brother used to be Sabretooth and Wolverine.
Yeah, of course.
So I had to let's go, bub part down, and he had the Sabretooth voice down.
Yeah. So I know that you brought up Nightcrawler, right? So I gotta ask this question. How do you feel about the new X-Men movies not really showing that Nightcrawler is Mystique's son versus
it's hard. I wish I would hope that would pop up sometimes. I have a little sympathy for them because there's 30 years of books and there's so many different connections that there's a limit to what you can show. But I think when they got Jennifer Lawrence to be Mystique, they just started using her all over the place for all sorts of different things that they hadn't used her in the books.
So my question is, are you working on anything currently that you can tell us about?
We just finished doing that book, and
I just ordered it today.
Okay,
so I'll be definitely reading and giving my review.
Okay. Well, that was a lot of fun, but it was about at least a year's worth of work. We're used to writing scripts, which is just kind of, here, quick, go record that. Here, I'll get you another one. And this doing the book, which is kind of this permanent thing, we dug through. We had to find a lot of the art. It's funny to talk about it now because everything's computerized, but back then the art was all hand drawn on cells. It was all hand painted. So it'd be maybe 100,000 hand paintings per episode, and they'd lay them on top of each other, and it would maybe take, for a second of screen time, they might use a couple hundred cells, a background, and all the different ones as every 12th of a second or so they take an image, and as he moved across, or they're fighting, or 4 different people in a frame, each one would have a cell that would be painted and be coming at each other. So we thought, okay, there'd be all sorts of wonderful artwork to find, because there were millions of paintings over the course of the 5 years, and almost all of them are just gone. They've just been thrown away because it costs money to store them. And at the time, 30 years ago, people didn't realize that there'd be a market for animation cells. So, I mean, in the older days, even before X-Men, there was a whole job called cell washer, where you take this beautiful, drawing that you've done of half the X-Men down to the last detail, and you just wash off the paint so that you could use the plastic again.
Right.
So in trying to do this book about the art of the show, we had to find, producers and artists had some saved, in their basements. Some art dealers had some that they'd saved, but it was hard tracking down. We've tracked down some wonderful stuff, but it was just kind of heartbreaking to see. So as you go through the book, some of the most beautiful images you've ever seen, and realize there had been thousands of these, and people just got rid of them.
Please make sure you go get the book. Eric, can you tell them the platforms that this book is on?
Yeah, there actually, believe it or not, there are 2 of them. There's 2 books. there's Previously on X-Men, which was a book that I wrote that with interviews of all the character actors and producers and executives, and that was done with a small production, with a small publishing house, without Marvel's participation. This was like 6 years ago, and they weren't, for whatever reason, there were rights issues, and they didn't want to go to the trouble of doing a book about the show. So, okay, fine, we'll do one ourselves. So I interviewed everybody, and that's a really dense book that has a whole history of the making of the show, like the stuff with Stan, stuff about getting the show on the air, the stuff about what it was like to be one of the voice actors, because we interviewed all the voice actors. So that one's 450 pages of all sorts of people talking about what it was, and very slight bits of drawing. But this recent that came out, Marvel saw it and said, "This is wonderful. Let's do a book with all the art in it." And so there's the second book, X-Men: The Art and Making of the Animated Series. So it's two separate. One previously is the history, and the art and making of the animated series is all about the artwork and what it took to put together. I talked to a lot more of the production people, the production managers, and the people actually drawing the storyboards and taping up everything together and making all the reports and getting them all out to Korea where it was all animated, and coming back and then seeing what it would look like once it was animated. So that's jam-packed with art. The first one is Previously on X-Men is a place called Jacobs Brown. Both of these are available on Amazon. Everything in the world's available on Amazon.
Yeah.
But if you buy the book through Jacobs Brown, the first book, they're signed. They come by every few months and get me to sign another 100 of them. But so if you buy it through the publisher, Previously on X-Men publisher, it'll be a signed copy. The other one, the art and making of the animated series, is Abrams Books, which is a big art book company in New York. And it's 4 pounds of artwork. It's just huge, and it's got obviously less writing in it than the first one does, because it's all about the art. But there must be 1,500 images in it. Wow. And lots of beautiful, color backgrounds and character designs from every single episode. Some of the artists, thank God, were real pack rats. And so if somebody was in charge of cleaning up all, the character designs, he kept all of them on, in files and digitized them for the computer. So we were able to cover every episode in detail on the art book.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Make sure y'all go get those 2 books.
Yes.
Man,
Yes. So my final question
Sure.
is, what advice can you give future artists who aspire to be like you and create these shows out of these awesome comic books that we've grown up on?
Well, 2 things. One of them is just start. If you're an artist, just keep drawing every day. If you're a writer, just keep writing every day, because there's a lot of people out here in Hollywood that have lots of ideas for stuff, and there's very few people that actually finish, that actually sit down and finish writing a story. And when I got that opportunity to start in 1985 on the GoBots, I had finished, maybe a dozen scripts. And because the lady that was running Hanna-Barbera said, "Well, do you have anything you can show me?" And if I just said, "Well, I've got a bunch of great ideas," then I never would have had a chance to work, because I didn't have anything to show. But since I actually finished a few things, I was able to show, okay, you want something short, you want something funny, okay, here's this one. You want something long and serious, here's this one. So I was able to show her that I was professional and I could get it done. And the more you write, the better you get usually. So writing and drawing, same kind of thing. That's the way the artists are successful out here too. When I was at Disney, every 3 months, they would have an open house, and artists could bring their portfolios of stuff they'd drawn to show, look what a good artist I am. Are you going to hire me on staff at Disney? And again, if you just, I have a bunch of great ideas for some artwork, and I had some sketches here that kind of started. that wouldn't get you anywhere.
Right.
If you had 40 or 50 beautiful things that you draw of all different kinds, because you don't know what kind of thing they're going to be looking for. If you've actually created a portfolio of stuff, then you can sell yourself to the people, because they're looking at you to say, how can this artist that's just come in the door help me and my show be successful and make money and make everything. And so if you've done the work already, you kind of, which is hard. It's hard to do it when you're not getting paid for it. It's really hard. Believe me, I remember.
Oh yeah.
But if you've done the work, then you've got a chance to sell yourself to the. And the other thing is you got to kind of go where the work is. When I came out here, this is pretty much the only place to do this kind of work. It's like, if you want to design cars, go to Detroit. You know, you can do it try to do it from your town, but they've got 500 people at the door in front of you, locally, that are ready to do it. So you got to go where the work is. There's a big production going on in Atlanta. There are a few in New York. There are a few in Chicago, but still, I think the majority are out here in Southern California. So if you get ambitious and you start drawing and you start writing and you're ready and save a little money, because it's going to take a while, go to the places that this stuff's getting made. Find out the companies that make your favorite shows and start with them and say, you're doing another show like this, like X-Men. I'm an artist. Look, I'd love to be part of it. And it's real heartbreaking again, but having those two things, having created something yourself so that you can show that you've got something to offer, and going to the place where they're hiring, those are the two biggest things we always tell people when they get started. Because, man, I grew up in East Tennessee, and I just thought, wouldn't it be cool? I'll just send my scripts in and Harrison Ford will buy my next script for sure. and it didn't happen. I had to move out here to make the opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. So basically what you just said, to sum it up for our listeners out there, is you have to have the work done. You have to have work done, quality work done already, even before you even go to the industry. Then you have to work in the industry, and you have to be in the place where the industry is. Does that sum it up?
It does. And the third one I had forgotten is be flexible. I didn't know I was going to work in animation. I love movies. I love TV shows. I love stories. And it just happened that Hanna-Barbera was the first store that opened. If it had been, a situation comedy or a primetime drama, Top Show or something, and I got into that corner of the business, that's where I ended up spending 30 years instead of animation. So be flexible. Don't just think this is all I can do. Maybe it'd be fun to try something a little different than you planned at first. So being flexible helped me out a lot.
Absolutely. And I think that we can see your flexibility in your years of experience, from, X-Men to Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to, and I don't think a lot of people realize that you did, what was it? The NFL Rush Zone, and you also did Young Hercules.
Yes. And Ryan Gosling was 17 when he was hired for that show. And my wife got to hug him twice.
Oh, she's lucky.
Yeah.
Now, Eric, my final question to you is, every creator has a character that is similar to themselves. If you can see yourself in one character that you helped create, and it could be X-Men or any other thing you've written, who would it be?
Okay. Well, boy, that's a tough one, because there are like 40 some shows, and some of them less memorable than others. Didn't do so well, but I just keep coming back to Xavier. He's just I'd like to think I'm a little funnier than he is sometimes, but I think at the core I'm a serious guy, and that I'm like being a parent. So it's I think of him as the father of that dysfunctional family. And so I keep coming back to him.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned that earlier, that you took all these young writers under your wing when you guys were doing this. Thank you so much for being with us here on IBP Media in the Culture Show. We are so grateful to have you. Make sure you send your regards to your wife and your family and all the people who contributed to the X-Men animated series back in the 90s.
Well, thank you, Emmanuel, and you too, Shay.
Thank you so much. It was such an honor and pleasure to meet you.